Chapter 3 starts us out with Spider making the obvious point that we need more than 3 people if we're going to operate a base, which is a fair observation to make. Chief R decides to send us to a POW camp to free some resistance prisoners and rescue some e-girl named Nana. But before that, there are some preparations we need to make. If we take the airbus, we can reach the shopping area and buy some new stuff to increase our body count, with new options and murder becoming available after every chapter. For now though, the weapon shop has the Thunder Buster and the Scope Buster. The Scope Buster has 20 power and 9 armor shield and weight, has a higher chance to hit than most weapons, and it increases your chance to critically hit by plus 4%. This is a great all-rounder for the time being, so we take it for now. We don't have quite enough for the sub-weapons, but they're not that great for us anyway. Meanwhile, at the item shop, we see some Mega Thunders for sale, which might be the game trying to foreshadow what kind of dangers we'll be facing soon. The general merchant sells all items that would be replaced with the new stock, so you never have to miss your chance to buy something you might have been saving up for. Meanwhile, the Force Metal shop has water guards, decoys, weapon energy plus 5, and analyzer. You can already guess what water guard does, but decoys are one-time consumable force metal that auto-revives you for 25% of your hit points whenever you die, similarly to X-Heart. Weapon energy plus 5 grants you a bonus plus 5 weapon energy that you start with whenever the fight begins. So X would start out with 30% weapon energy instead of the normal 25%. It's important to know that this has no bearing overall on his weapon energy generation. That's reserved for a different force metal. Then there's the Analyzer, which allows you to examine enemies for free and learn basic information from them like weaknesses and items that they drop or can be stolen from. For now, we only take the Water Guard since that's all we can afford, and with the Thunder Buster equipped, we make our way to the Tiana camp. Upon arrival, Spider immediately complains about having to take orders from someone, and that he has his own goals, which doesn't come across as very strange at first, but people who have played this game already know what's up at this point. Anyways, we tell him to stop being a baby because I didn't want him to come along in the first place, and he seemed to understand. Continuing down this hallway into the next room, we find this big guy with the fear of invisible bees and being snuck up on and... Hey! Spider, what the fuck did I just say? Oh great, now here are the bees. So anyway, this guy claims he's the massive hero of the Resistance, Steel Massimo. But somehow, despite being a hero, he comes across as very cowardly, which X and Spider appear to not question, like, at all. As for Massimo, he wants us to help him in exchange for his help. So, what's he want us to do?
Can you help me bust the roids out of this camp?
Once recruited, we unlock a new mechanic that I love so dearly, the Final Strike. Basically, the way this works is when an enemy reaches 25% of their maximum health, now represented by this little yellow bar that appears before the targeted enemy, and is still alive, you can initiate a Final Strike, where you basically just mash all your buttons as your 3 active party members just bombards that enemy to death. The closest equivalent I can really give is if all-out attacks from Persona 3 onwards were slightly more interactive. The timer is based on the number of enemies that drop into Final Strike range, so if X's charge shot barely doesn't kill multiple enemies, you'll get enough time to switch between all enemies to break them down. No, literally, it says break down right there. This also applies to bosses as well, and is a fantastic way to end a boss fight with a final bang. You also get rewarded with free weapon energy and force metal energy, which I'll explain later. This is one of my favorite mechanics of all time, but guess what? I can't even use it. You want to know why? Because in order to use the Final Strike, you have to have 3 active party members that are alive in order to even initiate it in the first place. Guess what I don't have in this challenge run? That's right, so I will never be able to show this off properly outside of this recorded footage I've taken outside of the run. I don't even get the fancy yellow bar to let me know that a boss might be close to death either. My realization of this was what suddenly made me realize that maybe Zero was right to check out of this game. But then I see Massimo's minuscule level 1 and feel much better about myself. But seriously though, Massimo starting at level 1 is totally fine and does have some obvious lore reasonings and implications behind it. And normally, he isn't a bad party member either. Just take a look at his massive health pool. I mean, we only had half of that at level 1, and that's kind of his big thing. He has good damage, great defenses, and enough HP to solo tank a Freykugel from the Demi-Fiend. Unfortunately, he does come with one major drawback, which is his piss poor resistance to elemental damage. By default, he takes 50% more damage from all elements, which is very bad for someone his size, because it means you'll want to avoid using him for some boss fights unless you give him some force metal to mitigate his elemental weaknesses for that fight. Fortunately, one water guard, for example, like the one he has equipped, reduces that weakness to 100% rather than granting the normal 25% reduction, so it's not as bad as it could be. If not for the fact that he only has 2 force metal slots instead of the 4 we have access to. You can't win them all, I guess. Also, this is where you can get your second power charge since Massimo inherently starts off with it, so yay! While we're exploring and getting through the first puzzle area of the chapter that's basically just dodge the security drones or start over, let's actually discuss the run going forward now that we're in the actual solo part of the run. Now that we have 3 party members, the game will start balancing encounters for 3 people. This results in an immediate difficulty spike for me, since Spider is still recovering from his One Piece binge, and Massimo is currently suffering from vitamin D deficiency. While some of these encounters are definitely on the easier side, like these Matars that we fought in the last chapter, some new enemies definitely give us a run for our money. As such, there's going to be a lot of running from encounters in the later stages, which is no problem since X pretty much has a guaranteed chance to escape most encounters. With that out of the way, let's unlock these prison cells and loot the joint. There are a few forced encounters as we progress, but we make short work of them for the most part, only taking a couple of knocks in the process. While it's not a huge deal now, conserving our tank energy plays such an integral part of this run that you really need to pick your battles at times. You can return to the HQ at any time via one of these save terminals and restore all of your resources, but that creates the problem of having to backtrack through the entire dungeon all over again unless you've unlocked shortcuts, if any even exist. Normally, I don't mind this kind of backtracking since you don't really need to use your sub-tanks that often and the game throws enough tank energy at you to keep you and your party sustained for pretty much the entire dungeon, but in a solo run, there will be a couple times where I do have to bite the bullet and head back to HQ. Eventually, we stumble upon some angry gamers that just lost a game of Call of Duty and decided to take out their anger on us. I would say something clever about how I dunked on them, but as it turns out, Call of Duty players have hands. So I did what anyone else would do in my situation, waste some of my precious resources on some basic ass mooks. The damage reduction of X-Fire does its job of keeping me alive for the time being. A single good charge collider is enough to kill the big monkey before it can unleash his power charge attack as I damage him for 2953 health. I guess this triggered some sort of flight instinct in his fellow gamer friends as they both proceed to shoot their shot and flee immediately after, ending the combat prematurely, much like their sex life. All in all, not an easy fight, but not exactly hard. Just one that required me to use a few more resources than I would like. However, since leveling up restores my hit points and hyper mode activations to full, there's really nothing lost if you can time your level ups just right. Once the fight is complete, we make our way to the other prison blocks and run into 3 big monkeys that completely max out their speed stat with boost all speed. This doesn't really change anything for them because I think I'm technically faster, so these were just wasted turns as far as I'm concerned. I do go into X-Fire form for sustainability and try to take each one of them down one by one. Since Charge Collider one-shots at 100%, I made sure to only use that on the one that has full HP while I power charged and killed the one that was already damaged. This was 100% the correct move and I finished the fight with half my starting HP. One of them drops a speed plus 3 force metal, which can be useful if you stack a few of them for extra turns, but not necessarily for me at the moment. After releasing the prisoners in the East Block, we immediately get ambushed by a creepy Doberman that keeps summoning back up before ultimately running away like a little bitch. Luckily, this guy has some secrets to tell after admitting defeat. Apparently, Nana was a top League of Legends player who was forcibly captured by the sweatiest gamer of them all, Silverhorn, and is currently being forced to smurf on his account until he reaches Challenger rank, the highest rank of them all, so that he can brag to all his friends about what a based-pilled giga-chat of a gamer he is. Not willing to stand for this, I made my way down to the lower levels to find and kill both Silverhorn and Nana for their transgressions of even installing the game in the first place. Oh yeah, I also released the prisoners, of course. Hey, remember when I talked about how some encounters are just complete ass to deal with in a solo run? Here's one of them right now. Meet the Dick Shark, or D-Shark for short. It sports 3600 life energy, resists shot-type damage unless its jaw is broken with at least 3 combat-type hits, and has the longest, most drawn-out attack animation in the game. And even though it's vulnerable to thunder damage, it resists shot type damage anyway, so it takes numerous turns and resources to defeat this asshole for basically no real reward at all. I wasn't kidding about calling it a dick. Upon reaching the lower levels, we're interrupted by a cutscene showing off Silverhorn living out his fantasy of finally experiencing what it's like to live with the gamer girl GF, but has a very misguided sense of how this relationship stuff is supposed to work. Fortunately, Nana isn't interested in a relationship and just wants to game, which works well enough for Silverhorn, whose advances are immediately rejected as Nana tells Silverhorn to get her some more gamer subs. What a swell guy for respecting established boundaries. Once the scene ends, we do some more exploring and discover a locked door requiring the Tiana key, which... yeah... we'll get to this in time, trust me. Anyways, there are a lot of encounters with big monkeys and Dobermen here, which is all fine and dandy, but if you remember how the first encounter with this specific encounter went, you'll know that it's probably easier to just run away than waste precious resources. We find another build armor and build shield and immediately shove them down our throat for better defenses. While I was thinking about it at the time, I also changed the formation of the party so that I was at the top of the list. This is because whenever you use an item or sub-tank from the pause menu, it defaults to the first unit. So if I get careless and spam the X button, I might accidentally give a stat booster to a Spider or sub-tank to Massimo, which wouldn't do anything, but it would still consume the tank energy, so I didn't want to risk that happening. Eventually, we reach the room where Nana is being held, and she sends her simps to kill us for interrupting her gamer state. The Prion pod is accompanied by 2 Prion Sparks. The Prion Sparks aren't really a threat, as you've seen before, but the Prion pod has a nasty bite to it. Usually it goes first, and we'll use this turn to prepare a freeze shot. If you don't deal at least 500 damage to it, it'll inflict heavy water damage that has a high chance to freeze you. Once frozen, you skip all of your turns until the freeze ends at 8 turns or until you take damage from an enemy. And if you do take damage, that damage is doubled. This is usually a game ender for a solo run since there's no way to cure this status without access to items, so you either have to pray that enemies waste their turns for the next 8 rounds, or you don't immediately die to the next attack you take. Luckily, we didn't get frozen, so the fight goes pretty smoothly, all things considered. With Nana's simps defeated, we all learned that this whole thing was a big misunderstanding. The truth is that Nana was only pretending to play on Silverhorn's account, but actually, she already got his account banned from Ladder for extreme toxicity. Needing a way out, she sought us for some help, so she used her gamer state to keep the alarms from going off. As for why her simps attacked us, well, some things are better left unanswered. Massimo does take this opportunity to ask Nana to Google his name out of curiosity, as we all do, and we learn that still Massimo was captured and then sentenced to execution for refusing to like this video and subscribe to the Robin and Zephyr YouTube channel, as well as their Clips channel. Spider almost hits the nail on the head with his theory that they killed somebody else, but to the average gamer, it's pretty obvious what actually happened. Soon after, we're met with the game of Simon Says, which is used to unlock the way forward. However, there are some optional items and doors you can unlock for figuring out the correct solution to those specifically through trial and error. This room in particular is notable because it has 5 stat boosters, so this is very worthwhile. This room has some extra tank parts, which will be useful to have, especially since every 4 you gather equates to a brand new sub-tank added to your current total. After that nonsense, we meet some prison guards who are guarding the way to steal Massimo. So we go on our way and wait, where did Massimo go?
About Massimo. I'm afraid that person may not be the real Massimo. He seems to be a little bit different from the one we have on record in the database. I didn't want to say anything.
I understand.
Man, X is the chillest guy ever. It's basically the equivalent of a D&D party being completely accepting of someone purposefully hiding their identity from them while they pretended to be a well-known superhero trying to live up to that person's namesake or something. Oh no. Meanwhile, Massimo talks to the real Massimo, and it's actually a pretty gruesome and foreboding scene when compared to the tone of the rest of the game.
My... It's... you. Oh my! What have they done? This is what they do when you refuse to join their clan.
It really cements the brutality of the rebellion army despite how not wrong they come off as later in the game. I really enjoy this scene because it's one of the more memorable parts of the game, as it shows that we could have had an insane badass party member who's got all his shit together. But instead, we get a guy who's filled with self-doubt about himself, his abilities, and his potential as a hero, unwilling to accept his self-worth as the man he idolized is hanging on the brink of death, telling him to carry on his legacy. It's a classic case of a character who will eventually grow into his own and finally realize that yes, he can be the hero he aspires to be. There aren't any jokes I can actually make about this scene, it's just a really good scene and serves as both an amazing setup for one of my favorite party members in this game, and a really solid callback to the original Megaman X game, where Zero also tells X that he could one day be even stronger than him. Once the scene ends, we backtrack a couple of feet to find these guards beaten to a pulp by Massimo, that we somehow didn't hear from beyond the door, literally 3 feet ahead of them by the way, and discover Massimo hanging outside of the real Seal Massimo's cell. Massimo tries to explain himself, but X seems to implicitly understand even if he doesn't say anything. We make our way back up and... oh, well, it looks like Nana's been kidnapped or something. Better go save her, but our tank energy isn't exactly in a good state at the moment. But there is a tank energy 100 in the room before Silverhorn's boss room. That's right, I decided to risk it for the biscuit, and tried to fight Silverhorn with 137% tank energy while equipping myself with 3 water guards and X-Heart. Uh-oh, it looks like Silverhorn discovered that his account has been banned. Well, that's okay, my guy. We could just make another account. Okay, whoa, dude, you're not supposed to do that to your girlfriend. Thank you, Massimo.
Ready to be destroyed?
Okay, so this fight is pretty straightforward, but not as free as Wild Django. Silverhorn has 17,000 life energy, absorbs water, has a 50% weakness to thunder, and comes with 6 abilities. Shot Geyser is a water-based shot type attack that hits a single target that's essentially his basic attack, so it doesn't really pose much of a threat. Cryogenics is very similar to Shot Geyser, except it has a chance to freeze, which we know by now is very bad. And Ultra Blizzard, which deals water damage to the entire party. For these attacks, Water Guard makes their damage a non-issue. The next move we'll see pretty often is Tidal Wave, which always deals 50% of the entire party's current hit points, but has a low chance to hit. As for the other 2 abilities, he doesn't use them until phase 2 starts, these being Liquid Coating to boost his water-based damage and lets him randomly block incoming damage, and Pressure Abyss, which deals heavy shot type damage to one target with a guaranteed crit chance. As for the fight itself, the first phase goes relatively well. If you're wondering why I'm using item capture, it's because Silverhorn has a combat absorber and shot absorber sub-weapon that you can steal at a 20% chance. Both of them grant a 25% damage reduction to the corresponding damage type, so I figured I could maybe get some use out of them at some point. Turned out that wasn't entirely true, but here we are. I start my first attempt trying to steal from him. When that doesn't work out, I start using boost shield items to start maxing out my current shield stat so that I can block against his Pressure Abyss and his other shot-based attacks. The most dangerous thing to watch out for is Tidal Wave, however, since it deals damage based on your current hit points, so the more hit points you have, the more damage it does. While this isn't as important now since his other attacks barely scratch my health bar, it will become more important for his second phase when Pressure Abyss starts becoming a problem. The Thunderbuster does a really good job whittling down Silverhorn's hit points, but my main concern in this fight is how I use my sub-tank energy. See, I can't heal myself back to full, or else Tidal Wave has a good chance to mitigate all that healing I just did in the first place. So you kinda have to find that perfect balance between using life gain 25 and life gain 50 to keep your health low enough to not take significant damage from Tidal Wave, but high enough to survive all other Silverhorn's attacks for the next couple of turns. This gets notably more difficult once Pressure Abyss is introduced, as you'll see in a moment. Upon reaching phase 2, the real fight begins. While he mostly functions the same, the added chance to have all your attacks deal reduced damage can be a bit annoying, since prolonging the fight means more tidal waves, and more tidal waves means more healing will eventually have to blow, which, yeah, we don't really have much left. Unfortunately, that lack of healing is inevitably what does us in, as we have no way to deal with Pressure Abyss dealing 580 damage on a crit. I'm pretty sure this is the highest amount of damage we've sustained so far, and even that is roughly half of our health bar. If he ever decides to follow up a successful tidal wave with this move, that's essentially just game over basically. Luckily, I can just heal myself and oh shit, that's a lot of damage. Okay, so at this point, I'm in a worse position purely because whenever you die, any buffs you had beforehand immediately fade, even if you were brought back by X-Heart or Decoy. So those boost shields I used at the beginning of the fight, gone, reduced to atoms. Even if I did have the healing to sustain myself, I'd be constantly fighting for my life due to lack of defense. Even with X-Fire as a last resort, there's just nothing I can really do if I'm hit by another Pressure Abyss. Unfortunately, with 11 hit points remaining, I finally go down to an Ultra Blizzard. So, let's go over the problems of this fight. While phase 1 is relatively easy, Tidal Wave definitely stretches your resources thin if you try to heal it up immediately. Instead, what you need to do when it comes to attacks like these is to only heal when you know that there's a chance that the next 2 attacks can't kill you. So staying above, say, 250 hit points ensures that I can survive 2 Ultra Blizzards before I need to be healed, which would only require me to use a life gain 25 rather than a life gain 50. Essentially, you're playing a constant game of keep away, where the keep away is death. I do make a couple of mistakes that I wasn't aware of at the time. The first is using boost armor thinking Shock Geyser did combat type damage, and the second thing is going into hyper mode after using a boost item. You see, for whatever reason, buffs you get from boost items just completely cancel out whenever you go into hyper mode. I didn't know this for a while, and I thought it would just stack with the defense boost from X-Fire. While you don't see it in this fight, there's also another downside to hyper mode that's never stated anywhere as far as I'm aware, which is the fact that boost items always miss when used on a unit that's in hyper mode. So I can't even boost my own stats while in hyper mode. I just have to rely on the innate stat boost provided by the hyper mode itself. One nice thing though that I discovered while using hyper mode though is that you are immune to percentage based damage like Tidal Wave, which is a nice bonus and a great way to give yourself some breathing room since you don't have to heal as much. If you can, however, try to save your hyper mode for when you reach a high percentage of weapon energy so that you can hit Silverhorn with a fat and meaty charge collider before cooling down next turn to conserve your hyper mode activations. Upon reaching phase 2 once more, we came better prepared. I played a bit more defensively with X-Fire though, just to see how much I would take from Pressure Abyss. Luckily, while defending, I only took 169 damage. Nice. Which means it would only be around 340 damage normally. This gives me a lot of leg room, or at least it would if I didn't have one turn left of hyper mode. Fortunately, my gamble paid off and I got some very good damage. I do elect to use a life gain max around this point though, since I've noticed he doesn't go for Tidal Wave nearly as much in phase 2. I then follow this up with a gain hyper to refresh my hyper mode activations. While I don't necessarily regret my decision to use one of these now, I do question whether or not I would have needed one in the first place if I had just played better or came back with full sub-tanks instead. Gained hypers are such an invaluable tool for this run because they're so hard to get and there are only so many fixed ones available to you. Using one this early is kind of like going to the store during a pandemic to buy some toilet paper. You never know if there's any still in stock or whether or not you're going to have to use the neighbor's garden hose again. Phase 2 is basically a rush to the finish, but with the mix of my 1 Mega Thunder, several Mega Fires, 1 final Charge Collider, and 50 turns later, Silverhorn gets sent to Horny Jail and I gain a 20% XP boost. He also drops the Ice Buster and the first build hyper of the game along with 3 whole level ups, bringing me to level 16.
I wanted to be like Massimo. As strong as Massimo. But now he's dead. What do I do now?
Gee, Massimo, I was going to ask if you wanted to hop on the battle bus, but I see you're having an episode. And with Nana secured and Silverhorn defeated, Chapter 3 is now complete.